Okay, ready for another deep dive? This time we're tackling chapter 4.
Ooh, this is a good one.
Yeah, it really is. Human and nature, the relationship between the two.
Mm.
And I think it's going to be really interesting to see how it's been looked at over time
Yeah.
and, from a bunch of different angles.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to be looking at, how philosophers think about it, indigenous wisdom,
Right.
and how our thinking has kind of shifted over the years.
A big one. Yeah.
So should we just jump into it with section 4.1?
Let's do it.
Philosophical perspectives on nature and humanity. It's interesting. We're starting way back with the ancient Greeks. You would think that their ideas would be completely irrelevant now,
You'd think so, wouldn't you?
but they're not.
No,
They're still like being talked about, being debated.
absolutely.
So yeah, it's interesting to see how, thousands of years ago they were already thinking about this stuff.
Yeah, well, I mean, a great example is Aristotle. He believed that nature actually had a purpose. Like, it wasn't just random, it was ordered and everything had its place.
Oh, interesting.
And that humans, we were part of that.
Mhm.
Not above it, we weren't separate, we were part of that whole system.
Oh, I see. I see.
And it makes you think, like, what does that mean for us today?
Yeah, especially with all the environmental stuff going on.
Exactly. Like, do we have a duty to nature based on its purpose? I mean, it's something to think about.
Yeah, if it has a purpose, what's our purpose within that purpose?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's deep.
Right. But things change, And this chapter talks about how, with the Industrial Revolution,
Oh, yeah.
things kind of took a different turn.
Okay.
Suddenly, progress and technology were the big thing, and nature became more like something we could just use.
Yeah, it became a resource to be exploited. Like we weren't partners anymore.
Right.
It was
Exactly.
more like, how much can we get out of this? It's like
Yeah.
we own the place.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's kind of sad.
But at the same time, some people started pushing back against that. And that's where you get ideas like deep ecology.
Oh, okay. Deep ecology. So is that the idea that nature has value just because?
Yeah.
Like we don't have to get anything from it. It just has value in itself.
Exactly. Like, it's not just about being useful to us. All life has inherent worth.
Okay.
And people like Arnie Nace, they were big proponents of that. Minimizing our impact, living sustainably, basically being good roommates to all the other life on the planet.
Not just our own species, but all of it.
Yeah.
So less about what we can get, more about how we can coexist. That's a big shift.
It is. It really makes you question a lot of things.
It does.
But, speaking of different ways of looking at things, what about these indigenous perspectives?
Yeah, section 4.2.
I'm really curious about this.
Indigenous knowledge, living in harmony with nature. It's fascinating how, for many indigenous cultures, it's not even a debate.
Right.
Like that connection with nature, it's not a philosophical thing, it's just how they live. It's their reality.
This lived experience.
And it leads to some really, really interesting and sustainable practices. Like they give the example of the Australian Aboriginals and how they use controlled burning.
Right. They've been doing that for like thousands of years.
Yeah, I mean, they're not just doing it to prevent big wildfires, they're doing it to manage the land.
Yeah, it's incredibly sophisticated. They're basically shaping the ecosystem.
And they're promoting biodiversity with fire. I mean, that's amazing.
Think about it. They know their environment so well that they can predict the weather just by watching how animals behave.
It's like they have this deep understanding of how everything is connected.
It's incredible.
It makes you wonder if we'd paid more attention to that kind of knowledge all along.
Yeah, what would the world be like?
Yeah, if we hadn't lost that sense of interconnectedness. Interesting to think about, but I guess for now we should move on to how our views have changed, right?
Let's do it.
Section 4.3, the changing views on humanity's place in nature. I mean, it's crazy how much things have shifted.
It is. For the longest time, it was all about humans being in charge of nature. Like, we were the dominant force.
Right, dominion over nature, that whole thing. It's a bit egotistical, isn't it?
A little bit.
Yeah.
But as you go through different historical periods, you see things start to change. Cracks start to appear in that dominant narrative.
It's almost like a pendulum swinging back and forth, right?
Yeah.
We start with this idea of humans as the rulers, and then the Industrial Revolution really amplifies that.
Yeah, it does.
But then, as the environmental costs become more and more obvious...
People start to question things.
Exactly. And you start to see the rise of environmental ethics
Mhm.
and this idea that nature actually has rights.
That's right. Like, maybe we're not so separate after all. Maybe we are part of this web of life, and we need to start acting like it.
Like, we're not superior, we're just a part of it.
Yeah,
And that's a big, big change in thinking.
it is. And it's something that we're still grappling with today.
Yeah, and it's not about going back to, like, living in caves or something.
No, not at all.
It's more about finding that balance.
Right. How can we live with nature?
Exactly. So how do we do that?
Well, it's interesting to see how our relationship with the environment has changed over time. Things like the agricultural revolution, that was a big turning point.
Okay, the agricultural revolution. So that's when humans went from like wandering around hunting and gathering
Yeah.
to actually settling down farming.
Exactly. We started cultivating crops, and that changed things in a big way. I mean, we started clearing forests to make room for fields.
Right.
We started diverting water for irrigation, basically shaping the landscape to fit what we needed.
So it was the start of humans trying to control nature.
In a way, yeah, you could say it was the beginning of like the great human experiment. Can we manipulate nature enough to survive, to create a good life for ourselves?
And I guess at some point we started to think we were separate from nature, not a part of it.
Yeah, it's a question a lot of people have asked. When did that happen?
Yeah, like was it a gradual thing? Or was there a moment where we were just like, nope, we're in charge now?
Right. It's probably a bit of both. But I think the Industrial Revolution really kicked that separation into overdrive.
Oh, okay, yeah.
With factories and mass production and all this new technology. It's like we started to believe we could control everything.
Like we were the masters of the universe.
Exactly. But of course, that came with consequences, right?
Yeah.
Pollution became a huge problem.
Right.
Industries were pumping smoke and waste into the air and water. We started using up resources like crazy to fuel all our machines.
And destroying habitats left and right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So many species started disappearing because we were taking over their homes.
It's kind of like we were so focused on winning, on progress, that we forgot we were playing a game we couldn't afford to lose.
That's a great way to put it. And it took us a while to realize we were losing.
Yeah, it did.
But the good news is things have started to shift in the last few decades. There's more awareness about these problems now. The environmental movement has really helped to challenge that old way of thinking.
Like, hey, maybe we're not so special after all. Maybe we need to start working with nature, not against it.
Exactly. It's about conservation, about sustainability, about environmental justice.
Okay, so what does that look like in practice? Are there any solutions that are actually working?
Oh, absolutely. There are so many amazing initiatives happening around the world. Things like nature-based solutions are really exciting. It's basically about using nature itself to solve our problems.
Oh, interesting.
Like restoring wetlands to filter pollution and prevent flooding, or planting trees to absorb carbon dioxide from the air.
Okay.
It's about working with nature's power, not trying to fight it.
So we don't always have to invent new stuff.
Not always, no. Sometimes the best solutions are the ones nature already figured out a long time ago. We just have to learn to pay attention.
That's really cool. But changing our relationship with nature isn't just about big projects like that, right?
Right.
It's about how we think and act in our everyday lives, too.
Absolutely. And that's where things like ecotherapy come in. Have you ever heard of that?
I think so, but remind me.
It's basically the idea that spending time in nature is good for us.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Like, it's not just about going for a hike because it's good exercise.
Right.
It's about actually connecting with nature.
Right.
And there's a lot of evidence that shows it can reduce stress, improve your mood, even boost creativity.
That's awesome. So, like, we're not separate from nature. We're a part of it. And when we spend time in nature, we're actually reconnecting with ourselves in a way.
Exactly.
It's like that saying, nature is not a place to visit, it's home.
I love that. And when we remember that, it changes how we see everything. It comes with a responsibility to take care of our home.
Our home, the planet.
Exactly, to
Right.
care for all the amazing life that we share this planet with. And yes, there are challenges, but there's also so much beauty, so much potential for healing and transformation.
And transformation.
It's a journey
Yeah.
full of challenges, but also full of incredible possibilities. It makes me think that maybe this shift in how we see nature isn't just about saving the planet.
It's about saving ourselves, too.
You got it. It's understanding that we're all connected and we need to find a way to thrive together.
This has given me a lot to think about. It seems like we started with this idea of humans being a part of nature. Then we went through this phase of thinking we were in charge, and now...
We're coming back around.
Yeah, but with a new understanding of how important it is to get it right.
Absolutely. So where do we go from here?
Yeah, that's the big question, isn't it?
I think the takeaway from this chapter is that we need to look at things more holistically. We're not separate from nature, we're a part of it.
Right.
And we have to remember that we're not the only ones who matter.
We have to care for the planet, for all life.
Exactly. And we have to be willing to change how we live to make that happen.
Wow. Feels like we've covered so much ground already. From ancient philosophy to like the Industrial Revolution, all this to understand how we see nature
Mm.
and ultimately how that impacts the planet.
Yeah, it's been a wild ride. And, one thing that keeps popping up is technology. It's kind of a double-edged sword, isn't it?
Oh, definitely. I mean, on one hand, it's a big part of why we have so many environmental problems.
Right. Like, think about all the pollution from factories and stuff.
Exactly. But at the same time, we need technology to come up with solutions for those problems.
Yeah, we can't just, go back to living without technology. That's not going to happen.
Right. That's not really an option.
So the key is, how can we use technology in a way that's actually good for the planet?
That's the million-dollar question. I
Yeah.
guess that's where things like renewable energy come in.
Absolutely. Solar, wind power, all that. It's about finding ways to power our lives without, destroying the environment.
Right. And what about stuff like sustainable agriculture?
Oh, yeah, that's huge too. Using technology to grow food more efficiently, using less water, less land, fewer pesticides.
And I've heard about things like bioplastics too, stuff that actually breaks down naturally.
Right. It's amazing what they're coming up with these days. So technology can be a powerful tool for change. It's just a matter of using it in the right way.
Yeah, it's like we're finally figuring out that we don't have to choose between progress and protecting the planet.
Exactly. And it goes back to what we were saying about those nature-based solutions, right? Sometimes the best ideas are the ones that are already out there in nature.
Like nature has already solved a lot of the problems we're facing.
Yeah, we just need to pay attention and learn from it. Like, observe how these systems work and try to mimic them.
It's like finally tapping into nature's wisdom. After all these years of thinking, we know better.
Exactly. And, that's what makes me feel optimistic. Yes, there are a lot of challenges, but we're not starting from scratch.
Yeah.
We have this incredible blueprint right in front of us.
Yeah.
And if we can just learn to read it, learn to work with it, I think we can make some real progress.
I agree. This whole deep dive into Chapter 4 has been really thought-provoking.
Me too. It's definitely made me think differently about how I interact with the natural world.
Yeah, it's like a reminder that we're all part of something so much bigger.
Exactly.
So where do we go from here? What's the takeaway for our listeners?
Well, I think the biggest thing is to remember that we're not separate from nature. We're a part of it. And that means we have a responsibility to take care of it, to live in a way that doesn't harm the planet or the other creatures who call it home.
It's like we need to become guardians of the planet.
And exactly. And use our creativity and our ingenuity to find solutions that work for everyone, human and non-human.
Yeah. To build a future where both humans and nature can thrive.
That's the goal, isn't it?
I think so. Well, that was a really fascinating conversation. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive.
Thanks for having me. It was a pleasure.